Welcome to another episode of the Headcount Experts. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Chris. Is it Abass? Abbass? I should have asked this probably before.
Abbass is good, yeah.
From London, that means I'm outnumbered in two ways, from the geography and the naming. So I got a lot to come back from. I'll see what I could do on this podcast. But great to have you on. You lead Talentful, which is one of the bigger RPOs, one of the more successful RPOs. I know every recruiter that I've seen leave the corporate world starts their own agency. Few make it to 300 plus employees with a global footprint and some of the best technology companies in the world. So I'm very curious on your perspective. Chris is as well. And welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So do you guys have a rivalry in the UK, London space? Are you from differing neighborhoods, differing soccer teams? Like, give me something to work with here. How do I differentiate here? How do you want me to, which Chris is which?
I think we're actually on the same team. We're both Northerners.
Really?
Right?
Yeah.
I'm from Blackpool.
Oh, we used to vacation there a few times a year. Blackpool Tower and the Three Piers, the promenade. Yeah, I know it well.
Team strengthens.
Exactly. The bond is strengthening, actually.
All right. Well, tell us how you got to the U.S., how you started Talentful. I gave us a little bit off camera, but we've heard Chris's story. It's very impressive, or Chris from Headcount Experts. So,
the Northern
Mr.
English
Abass,
Chris.
tell us how you got here. How'd you get to where you are today? What was the path? Yeah, and kind of give us the context for how we're going to be speaking today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was actually a musician for all my life and realized I wasn't going to be a rock star and fell into recruitment, as you do, the next logical path from rock star to recruiter. But the path into kind of founding Talentful was really kind of cutting my teeth in recruiting agency, where I spent many years. Then I went in-house. So I went to Shazam, the music recognition company, which was one of the most loved apps in the world. Everyone I speak to about Shazam loved the product. It was used by hundreds of millions of people, and it was a very kind of engineering and product-led company. So that was really great experience for me to work there, partner with the C-suite, and grow that business during its kind of heyday.
Did you guys have anything in office? You know how you name a conference room? Did you guys ever do anything with the movie? Or is that my American culture coming into the place here? The Shaquille O'Neal I'm a Genie movie?
Not
I don't know
movie,
if that was threaded in.
But we did have an amazing kind of perk where they had a stage in the office and they would have like famous artists come in and do like private concerts like once a month. And so we had some really cool folks come in and play music for the team. So that was one of the best things about working there. After Shazam, I went to Amazon, and that was a totally different experience. Shazam was 250 people. My recruiting agency was small. Amazon is, of course, like massive scale. And the really impressive thing about Amazon is how they've managed to scale that business whilst keeping a very clear process, structure, and their leadership principles at the core of every single thing they do. So that was something that really impressed me and was very different. And again, they were a company that was very kind of customer focused, and they have obviously their everything that underpins what they do is customer obsession. And Jeff Bezos is famously an advocate of customer obsession. So I went to both of those companies. And then the short story is notice reoccurring themes and patterns inside high growth technology businesses, mainly around the difficulty in capacity planning, right? A lot of these companies just do not know what's going to happen in 6 to 12 months. They're racing, they're building new products, they're competing in highly competitive markets, and it's very hard to predict what's going to happen. And if you look at the last 5 years, that lack of predictability has accelerated, right? We've had massive booms, we've had busts, we've had natural disasters and COVID and all kinds of things going on. And so the use case for Talentful and why we set it up has strengthened over time, but really it was about providing a modern solution to that problem that was the anti-agency and anti-big RPO, kind of fully focused and dedicated on the tech sector. So that's where we started. We grew the business in Europe. I moved to the US in 2020, and the business as it stands now is around 350 employees, fully bootstrapped, no investors, and around $50 million plus in revenue.
Amazing. Amazing. And you have some other things as well. I see the hire community and obviously Talentverse in there. The hire community is probably one of the better. Well, I'll let you describe it before I give my commentary on it, but I thoroughly enjoy the Talent 100. But give me an idea of how those play into the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always try and keep, because of the experience at Amazon and Shazam, try and keep this underlying philosophy of, how we run the business, how we make decisions. Talentful, it's around inventing the future of recruiting for our clients. So always being on the front foot and looking at what the upcoming trends are in our industry and just generally across the market. And one of the things that we really believed in is that as AI proliferates through the industry and through markets in general, the effectiveness of outreach is going to diminish. And that's because everyone can send mass spam that's highly personalized and very hard. It's going to be very hard to differentiate yourself with outbound. So what's the next phase of, I guess, looking at how you build relationships with prospects, how you engage, how you keep your finger in the market, a finger on the pulse of the market, and how you get closer to your customers. And we believe that that is community. And so we made a bet in 2023. How can we kind of take that step? Me and Phil actually met, my co-founder, we met in this community 15 years ago. And so we knew the community really well. We knew its history, and there was an opportunity to acquire the community. So we did that in 2023. And we've built that as the kind of underlying way that we engage with our current customers and give them access to peer-to-peer networking. And we also get to meet new customers and build a relationship with new customers, as well as provide a lot of value to them as they grow their careers and are figuring out how to navigate this world. So that's the kind of one side. And then we believe in this barbell strategy. The future is going to be heavily barbell. It's going to be deeply personalized and relationship driven on one end, all the stuff that you can only do as a human being. And then on the other side, it's going to be highly technical, AI driven, lots of automation. So we actually hired the CTO of Shazam, that was my stakeholder, a guy called Charles Henrich. We hired him in 2022 to be our CTO. So he was VP of engineering at Google, Yahoo. He's got incredible resume as a technologist. He came to the business to build the underlying technical infrastructure on how we run Talentful and turn it into kind of an AI first, tech first RPO. And so they're the kind of two ends of the business that we have. We have the people in the middle, we have the community, and we have the technology.
I think it's going to be interesting how the agency world will actually come back around to the getting in front of people and doing the people things with the technology. I think it's going to be a very interesting swing back to, that was like my foray into recruiting back in the early 2000s, was the agency side, and the amount of in-person that actually mattered then kind of died off with LinkedIn, and then now I think is coming back. I think at the end of the episode, I got a couple of hot takes. We do a little hot take segment where we'll show you some LinkedIn posts that you can react to about what's going on in the culture. But I'm curious. So for me, it's a delight to have two sides of the capacity planning on the same call. So if you don't know, Chris Mannion comes from, well, I'll let you tell it, a supply chain background. And then from you on the, running one of the bigger RPOs that we've had the opportunity to talk to, you're constantly guiding your customers about how to manage this capacity. And there's two sides, right? Capacity of the business, like what is the business actually going to do? What is the forecast of the business? And then what is the recruiting forecast to then meet that? And how does that interact with an RPO or an agency? How do you make those decisions, et cetera? But Chris, why don't you give a little high level of your kind of supply chain background and your approach to capacity planning? And then let's kind of dive into some of, how should companies be looking at a headcount plan? How should they be looking at the scenario models in a FP&A tool to then come up with a recruiting strategy that allows hires on time, revenue on time, whether it's in-house, RPO, or some combination of the two?
Yeah, I
So
think
that's
it's
where I'd
really
love to go with this.
I think there's probably a lot of crossover in maybe the way that the two Chris's on the call approach capacity planning, and it's more of like how kind of a business team would do S&OP planning. Is you're looking ahead, how's the business going to grow or decline over time? What are going to be the impacts that are going to drive that? And then feeding back from that into what headcount you need. And I think Chris's barbell analogy is a really strong one. I actually got into a lot of trouble on LinkedIn like 3 or 4 years ago for talking about this and saying, recruiting roles in the future are not going to be recruiters. You're going to have like essentially systems engineers or talent engineers, I think we're calling them now, who are running these like systems or like portfolios of tools, and you're going to have highly relational based, almost internal consultants that are actually advising the hiring managers and helping them to make good decisions. And my point then was like, you pick a lane and then invest in that for the next few years, because that's where we're going to go. And I'm actually curious to hear from Chris's perspective how that is impacting his own capacity planning for his team. So it's interesting because he has like two main stakeholders. He has his external like customers who he's advising, this is how you should plan your capacity for your headcount over time. But also he's got to look internally and say, well, how many recruiters do we need? If we are building our own AI kind of recruiting tools and also have all these off-the-shelf tools available to us, that's going to impact the number of recruiters we need. But his company has grown over time. So I think the argument around AI is taking all of our jobs is pretty void right now. So I'm actually really curious to dig into that a little bit, Chris, and actually just see if that kind of forward-looking projection matches how you're looking at things, or if there's like a tweak that you do where you actually look at things a little bit differently, given how close you are to this, both on the customer and the internal side.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think your LinkedIn post is spot on. I think that the way we're thinking about it is the predictions might be right, like some roles may be replaced. But what will happen is new roles will replace those and backfill them, right? What we're seeing is exactly what you said. You're going to need very kind of tech native, analytical, systems minded people who can manage and orchestrate tools, whether that's agents or it's using Claude Code or whatever it might be, and can replace workflows to make themselves more effective, make teams more effective. Now, I'm sure you guys have used AI extensively. It is very hard to get a workflow fully replaced, autonomously working without a lot of maintenance, right? Firstly, you're going to have to make sure all the data input into that workflow is clean, is accurate, is updated properly, which is a nightmare to do at scale, because that's a behavioral shift in your company. And it's a action that everyone has to take like clockwork, which is really difficult. And then, AI hallucinates. So it will start pulling from the wrong place. It will mistake what it should be pulling. It will visualize it differently than what you need it to. It will just change its mind overnight. And then you have to have someone who's constantly maintaining those pipelines and the integrity of the systems that you're building. So what we're seeing is, there's going to be this need for these AI native people. We're calling them solutions engineers in our business. A lot of companies are calling them forward deployed engineers. They're calling them AI engineers, whatever they might be calling them. And we're trying to think about what the future of a recruiter's role will look like. And I think it's exactly as you said. If you think from first principles, I don't know, let's say 50% of the role of a recruiter at least was historically admin based, repetitive. It was, I get a brief, which is essentially just a criteria of skills and a wish list of nice to haves, must haves, etc. And you also understand the company's culture, which if a company's culture is really thoughtful, you should be able to define it, right? It shouldn't be, I'll just wait until I see the right person, or I'll know when I speak to the person. That's the worst kind of culture because it's hard to define. So you should be able to define your culture in some sense. You should be able to define the skills that you need. Then what you do is you go out, you search for someone through LinkedIn or other various methods. You're scanning through many pages. You're selecting the best people. That is currently or has been human judgment. That's at best, 90% accurate. Then they reach out to the people, try and personalize the message with the objective to get someone on a call. So almost everything pre-call can be automated from a first principle standpoint. And if you've managed recruiters before, you know that getting recruiters to do admin is an absolute nightmare. For my whole recruiting career, managing hundreds of recruiters, I've had to really drive home how important admin is, how important all of this stuff is for recruiters. Now they get the chance to not do this, to actually outsource this to AI. So I'm actually quite surprised at the pushback a lot of teams are getting in terms of recruiters feeling kind of fear or not wanting to replace their role with or aspects of their role with AI. Because for my whole entire career, they've never wanted to do this stuff anyway, right? So there's this kind of juxtaposition here. But I think ultimately a lot of the role can be automated. And as you said, I think we're going to have a different skill set, which is much more relationship focused. It's about providing a kind of concierge white glove experience to candidates, to hiring managers that is similar to when you go to a Michelin star restaurant or you go to a 5-star resort. I think that's going to be what we have to do, because if everyone's got access and the kind of sourcing and finding and attracting candidates is commoditized, then how do you compete? And I think it's really about the experience that you provide. And so I feel the recruiter role is going to become more and more sales-like. You're going to have to be a master in kind of engaging someone through the process, making sure that you're negotiating properly. You're being very thoughtful with how you structure someone's compensation and think about what they need and how to get them across the line, how to compete against other offers that are coming into the business, how to provide this really kind of bespoke and personalized experience. I think that's going to be the job of a recruiter on the candidate side. And then on the hiring manager side, being a much more consultative in your approach, how you're mapping the market, how you're looking at kind of salary and compensation information, how you're looking at the different skill sets in your organization and what you need to hire, and looking ahead rather than being reactive. I think that's going to be the job of the consultant on the hiring manager side. I'm not sure whether those are two different roles at the moment, but I think that that's definitely where things are going.
I think it's going to be an interesting, and I want to dive into kind of the headcount aspect of it as well. But like when you think about a job changing like that, when it's a production role, you might change the number that you need. And to Chris's point, right, your customers have a headcount plan that require an RPO for supplemental resource or just as a part of their ongoing strategy. And then the RPO is planning its own headcount plan based on the production and ramp time. So you have this kind of like dual headcount plan where you might have, for every 100 customers that you have that have 1 to 5 roles, you then have a number of recruiters you need to service those roles. And given the seasonality or how things trend up and down, you're going to need to carry float. So I think, starting from the company side, right? What are you seeing in headcount plans today from your customers? So from my aspect, I see headcount plans differently because of the Headcount 365 software. We have a capacity demand forecast built into it, and we can sense like when roles are hitting. So in previous lives, as at Uber or wherever I was before, the plan was annual, where now it's like a little bit more ad hoc. We need this right now, or there's something happening, so we're going to lay off right now. And so what I'm seeing is a little bit more reactionary demand, which is impacting, like someone might determine they need something 60 days out and it takes 90 days to fill the role. So if you're the RPO trying to fill that role faster than it's even possible to be filled, you can't hire someone based on that demand. So I guess my first question is like, what are you seeing in your customer headcount plans today? Are you seeing, increase or decrease in the demand of heads? Are you seeing different seasonality, a change in the roles? Like, what is your macro Recruiternomics take on your customer headcount plans?
Yeah, so how we're seeing it is it's a tale of two cities, really. We've got the kind of high growth hyperscalers that are raising a lot of money in the AI space that are growing at astronomical levels. Now, I think they're in a advantageous spot because they've not got a lot of debt in the company. They're able to build the company for this new world almost as they're growing. So they're not having to go back and look at their org structure and redefine it and think about, do we strip out middle management? Do we do this? Because they're building it through this innovation that's happening. So it gives them an advantage. Then you have the larger enterprises that, are thousands of people, maybe 10,000 plus, that have been around for decades. Now, there's a huge shift that's happening and it's rapid. Every month, Anthropic comes out with a new model or a new feature that can disrupt a whole industry. So I think these companies are really going through a full-scale transformation. They're looking at their org structure. they're putting a pause on hiring, or they're saying making layoffs because they're restructuring their whole company for this new world. And that's a much more painful process because you're going to have roles that just don't exist in the future. You're going to have new roles that you don't even know that you need yet, or are very new roles that you're having to think about how they work in your organization. And so what we're seeing is there's this hyperscaler cohort, which is, they're competing, they're in AI, they're raising tons of money, they're going to win their market, and they're not slowing down. They're just foot on the gas. And then we have these large enterprise, which, could be making layoffs in one area and then growing rapidly in another because they're focusing on a new skill set. So I think that's what I'm seeing in the market. And then if you look on a kind of higher level view, there's a lot of research coming out from Citadel and others, which are showing, jobs in software engineering are increasing, month on month, and they have been all year. And even kind of the kind of high volume, kind of lower skill jobs in call centers and customer service, they're starting to grow again, right? So this idea that AI is replacing all jobs, I don't think is actually coming out in the data. And in fact, we're seeing the opposite. So it's going to be a really interesting kind of rest of the year. But I think that overall, I see the picture is going to be growth for most companies.
It's interesting with the job changes. So I come from the Uber environment, right? Uber was competing with Lyft. It was a price war to the bottom. And then once it was won, then they raised the price again. So it used to cost $3 to go to the airport. Now it's $35, right? And to see jobs come back as a relationship to token spend, like we interviewed a CFO not too long ago who was just like, I don't even care. I'm not even hiring. I'm just spending on tokens. I don't care what it is because the return's so high, and my own experience with software engineering on my team is like, it just changes the job a little bit to be more architectural rather than writing. The code's the easy part. That's, not necessarily the hard stuff. So you still have to have the thought and the construction and the context to not only compensate for the hallucinations, but also to like make it a cohesive story. So once pricing comes up, right, all these companies are operating at like a loss for what, and then it'll come to a business decision, right? So the same way a business is making a capacity decision on, do I hire an internal recruiter and carry the burden of their employment and whether or not they're going to have enough over the course of a unknown forecast, or can I contract out an RPO? Companies are going to be making those decisions with AI as far as like, should I add like once the price of tokens come up, am I adding a person or am I adding tokens? What's easier? What's a business decision? I think we're going to see that, across the way.
I think there's another factor there as well that I think kind of relates to that. I was thinking as Chris was talking. So one of the benefits of the RPO is that the team is already ramped. So we talk a lot about capacity, and it's not just time to hire, it's actually time to build the recruiting capacity before you actually can start the hiring process. And so in this like world where there's spiky demand, you almost have these kind of questions around, okay, do we supplement with tokens? Do we hire a person? And if so, do we need an in-house team versus an external team? And some of the things that I've been hearing with larger companies is whereas the small ones are kind of growing and they have maybe an uncertain growth path, the larger ones have this uncertain demand because they're not growing, but they do want to stay steady state. And so there's this like dynamic resource allocation of, actually, when someone leaves, we may repurpose that role elsewhere. We might not have the right skill set within our in-house recruiting team. So I'm actually curious, kind of related to that, Chris, how you're seeing the demand. You do like startups, scale-ups, enterprise. Like, how are you seeing the demand vary across there for RPO versus in-house? And is that telling us anything about kind of how different companies are thinking about this challenge?
Yeah, great question. I think that ever since COVID, and, we had that tech recession in 22, 23, where there was just this mass layoffs of recruiters. I think that companies are starting to think about their business and where their core expertise and focus lies, and then outsourcing non-core functions, right? Because a company only has a certain amount of bandwidth and energy and focus. And if I'm trying to build humanoid robots, do I really want to spend my energy building a recruiting organization and a high performance recruiting organization, or do I buy that expertise and bring that in? So I think we're seeing a lot of that is these companies are looking at where they get the most leverage for their investment, and they're making much more commercial decisions. I think that in the past, it was very much up to the talent leader, and many talent leaders, maybe they're in that role for the first time. They want to build a big team so they can say they build a big team. And I think that now they're having a much more commercial view on how they do these things. It's like, I spend X. If I spend $1, do I get free back here? That's the kind of thought process they're having. So we're seeing the need for flexibility. As you said, things are changing all the time. Companies don't want to make these mass layoffs again. It's bad for PR. It's bad for culture. They also want to build the capability. So buy the capability rather than build it. And they can do that much faster by using someone like Talentful. There is a quality and a speed and a kind of cost element to that as well. So, when you're bringing in a vendor like, an RPO, there's aspects that you're not, paying for. For example, you're not giving RSUs, you're not giving equity, all those things that for these companies is highly valuable. So there's a kind of cost equation as well. And if you're trying to hire the best in AI talent, you should go to the company that is working with the best AI companies in the world, right? Because they know what the market looks like. They have the bird's eye view of what's going on. The really interesting thing, though, is we're seeing non-traditional technology businesses building AI capability. And I think what we're going to see now is every company starts building AI capability, right? So you're going to be looking at manufacturing, you're going to be looking at retail, you're going to be looking at pharmaceutical, all these different industries are going to start hiring AI engineers, machine learning engineers, forward deployed engineers. We're speaking to a bunch of accountancies at the moment and finance consultancies that are looking to build forward deployed teams, right? So because we built our specialism in this sector for the last 10 years, working with some of the best AI companies in the world, they want to just outsource that. They don't have the capability internally. We've got a recruiting team that hires hundreds of CPAs every year. We don't even know what a forward deployed engineer is or how to find them. So there's that aspect too, kind of building in that, bringing in that capability. So I think that wave is going to continue. I think the reason why we decided to be tech focused is we just believed that every company was going to be a tech company at some point. And I think the same is true. Every company is going to have AI and be an AI company because you can't avoid it. It's going to be the baseline for every company is utilizing AI, whether it's to increase productivity, to reduce cost, whatever you want to focus on, it's going to be a crucial part of your business. And you're going to need the right talent to get you there.
What's the sell against an RPO? I've done the RPO stuff. I've hired RPOs on myself. So I have my own answer of like the break even point, et cetera. But if you had to sell against it, like what makes an RPO not a fit for somebody? And, when they're looking at a headcount plan for an upcoming year or the rest of the year, like how do you say, now you should do that internally, or maybe an agency's better? Like what's your logic as someone on that side of the business who's been doing it so long?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer. The way our model works is we embed teams inside organizations. So our folks will be part of that team for a period of time. Now, in almost every case, we are augmenting an existing TA team, right? And my recommendation to TA leaders is you should have your own team, right? Like there should be a foundational layer of in-house permanent recruitment. And that layer should be able to deal with the guaranteed headcount that the headcount demand for, let's say 12 to 24 months, including attrition, right? So you can manage that. Now, what you need for the kind of the agility and the spikes and the troughs in headcount is a partner that you can rely on that can integrate into your team. And so that's where we come in, is that we're there for that uncertainty, for the spikes of growth, for international expansion, for these use cases that are outside the kind of base level demand. So that's what I would recommend. To your point about what's the pushback, I think the biggest pushback is we want internal people because they understand the business better, right? They're part of the organization. They can become part of the team. They really get to the grip, to the heart of what's going on in the business, and they can represent the company better. And there's a sense of control as well. Like the leader can control what's going on with that team. They have more insight into that team, so on and so forth. So I think that's probably the biggest pushback when it comes to an RPO. It's like that sense of control and kind of ownership that a permanent team might have. I think there's some really, maybe not to get into now, but I think there's some really exciting use cases when it comes to AI that actually can overcome a lot of that historical challenge. But that's, I'd say, the biggest pushback. I don't know what you would say, but that's what we see.
I mean, I think there's if it's a one-off role, if it's a brand new role to the organization, if you don't have a team, I have this kind of philosophy that, like, so before I started Headcount, I had this consulting firm called Unicorn where we would go roll out the foundation so that a company who just received investment had the scale right out of the get-go. So I'd take basically the playbook from Uber or Bird or wherever I was before and put it in. Comp and leveling framework, headcount plan, yada, yada, yada. The headcount plan was the most popular thing, thus a software. But the other thing that I did was I would put in the recruiting pitch, which means candidates take jobs for two reasons, right? It's a better thing for me now, or it's a better thing for my future, or both, right? So three reasons. But if you didn't have an answer, why is it a better manager, better salary, better location, whatever, or equity payout in the future, promotion capability? If you didn't answer those two questions, it's very difficult for any recruiter to be successful, let alone an external one who's balancing multiple companies at the same time. And so that was kind of a requirement. If you're going to use supplemental agencies and you didn't have a good intake session interview rubric, you didn't have a good recruiting pitch that answered those two questions, very difficult to go out and then train someone who is not necessarily inside your company, albeit as much as they are, right? That foundation is kind of critical. So I think general alignment there. And I also have a budget idea of what break even is for a given recruiter. If they're doing more than 32 roles a year, then you should probably go in-house if you can sustain that over the course of a period of time. So those are like what I had come up with back in the day, but that was, pre-AI, it's 2019. That's like old thinking. So that's a very interesting question to me as far as like, talent is a service to the business. The business says, we want to hit this number. And that could be a pipe dream, right? We've done that at Uber. It's like, we want to launch these cities. Like, we want to launch France in 30 days. Like, takes them 90 days to quit. How do you want to do that? Right. So talent gets a pipe dream sometimes. And then the talent leader just like, all right, okay, I have a team and every hiring manager thinks they're a P0 and they really have to balance it. It's become fascinating to me now, especially with the AI stuff kind of like changing the way productivity happens and whether or not productivity is a human, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that to me is like, there's so many resources and I think TA leaders are getting smashed with like all the different ways of an external recruiting source can help. Trust is probably the biggest thing that I would say is the seller. Which is why it's been super impressive to see a firm like yours grow to the extent that it has. It's an indication of trust. There's some sort of lasting, permeating relationship that allows people to not only come back, but also refer to others. And you're kind of become a meaningful member of the community, which I come from like New York agency days back in, 2006, 2007. I left for a reason. So anyway, that's my take here. How much time we have? It was 7:42 in the morning here in Los Angeles. We try to save the last few minutes for the LinkedIn reaction section. It's Wednesday, the 27th, so we're a little earlier in the week. I don't have as much of a repertoire built up, but we got a couple of good ones. I'd love to share my screen and kind of show you what it is that we're doing. So these are live reactions for the Chris's, curated by Eric.
This is where I get canceled.
Okay. No. It's not that crazy. Dang, this I'm behind a paywall on the first one, but I'm still gonna do it because it's too much to share or to find a new one. I mean, this to me is funny, but the article said the funny thing about the article is like the bold CEO got rid of HR, said his problems disappeared. That's one part of the funny. The other part of the funny is replace them with people partners instead of HR.
Yeah.
What's your take? Is this going to be a trend that we're worried about in the future? People getting rid of HR departments? Does he have a point? If so, what is it? What do you guys think? What's your reaction? Chris Abass first, but I can see Chris's gears turning.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think we're seeing a lot of convenient excuses for layoffs at the moment, whether it's AI or it's HR or whatever else. And I think that it's a much more convenient answer to say that than say I fucked up and I did the wrong thing and hired the wrong people and hired too many people, basically. And so, as you said, I mean, if you think that HR is causing all the problems, I think that you are wrong. That's probably not happening. I think that more layers can create more complexity. So you might have had the wrong org structure, you might have had the wrong roles in place to give you the outcomes that you want. But I wouldn't blame it on HR. That's just hiring the wrong people for your organization. So yeah, I think that, yeah, I just think a lot of these excuses are very convenient at the moment. And I'd love to know actually what the real reasons were.
Chris, what
I
do you
kind of
think?
liken it to, it's like if you ignore the problem, it doesn't become a problem anymore. If you blind yourself, it's like I'm driving down the road and there's too much traffic, so I'll just close my eyes and now all the traffic is gone. But that's not going to end well. I just think it's very short term thinking.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast from him as well. He basically said that because they're mainly remote now, a lot of their HR issues were in person because of like in person, complaints and people being inappropriate or whatever else. So now they're remote, they don't need HR. I was like, what? I was like, okay.
All right, let's cue up the next one. It's kind of a story that continues with the next one. There we go. 7 HR roles that will disappear by 2028, and this is Daniel Kafer. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Links to all of these will be in the article that this podcast gets published above. He's a content creator, a founder. He used to run a country for Facebook. But he's saying 7 roles that will disappear by 2028, calling talent acquisition the canary, which is interesting for this group. But there's also some within L&D, benefits administration. I kind of get the coordinators and the help desk piece, but you can see a highly reacted to article here about HR roles getting compressed with AI. What's your reaction? Do you agree with these roles that he's compressing? Would you sub in other ones or maybe talk about a different architecture change within HR? What's your take on the 7 HR roles getting compressed with AI?
Yeah, I have a point of view on this. I mean, firstly, I think we need to start from the point that no one knows what the hell they're talking about. Right. And I think that all this is speculation. I mean, things are moving way too quickly. I think the people even running these companies don't know what's going to happen. Right. And so I think that that's the first place. And I think that, in general, I think companies have consume unlimited resource and headcount. Right. That is always the case. And it's your job as a CEO or leader to find the best possible outcome with the least possible resource, right? And I think that's really how to think about it. Every company is going to have a different approach to how they do that and what they think is important and the different emphasis they have on different parts of their business. So I don't think this one size fits all approach is useful. And so I think that it really depends on your business, like what the levers are, where you're going to get the most return on investment, and looking at that in a very thoughtful way and an analytical way. And yeah, I think that the general sense that like the more admin heavy, repetitive work will be replaced, I think is probably right. But I think no one has any idea what that will turn into and what additional work that will create, right? And I think that that's the unknown part. But what we're seeing now is, I think there's going to be a market of abundance, in my view. I think that all this work is going to increase productivity. There's going to be more jobs for people. They're just going to be different. So yeah, I'm not sure these predictions are kind of fun, but I think they're kind of useless at the same time.
Yeah, I think we're going to see redesign of roles, and I think thinking of jobs is probably an old-fashioned way of looking at it, and we kind of equate one job to one person. Like there's one recruiter and there's one coordinator, whereas these are just like collection of tasks that need to be done, and a lot of those tasks are going to be automated, and we're just going to have different roles or different like groupings of tasks. So the people are still going to be there, and I think when someone reads that headline, they're like, okay, well, 7 people in every however many it was 15 are going to get fired. That's not actually the case, but it's sensational enough that 1,000 people will react to it. So I think there's some truth there, but I don't think it's as clear cut as it sounds.
I think that's absolutely right. Actually, I think that They're looking at stuff from the outcome you want. We need to hire, 100 people every year, and we need to grow by 20% year on year. How are we going to do that? Right? What are the new jobs that will allow us to do that? Marketing, we need to generate 1,000 MQLs every quarter. Right? How are we going to do that? It's about the outcome and working backwards, not I have to have these defined roles in all these places. That doesn't matter anymore. I think we should be looking at how we can achieve that goal in the most effective way possible. I think you're absolutely right.
I'm curious to see how the job description itself changes. I think that thing's kind of been the same for a long time about the company and why you should work here and experience. Like I'm out of the game as far as creating job descriptions, or at least on a bigger scale, like I used to be. But I think there's something there. Someone's got to figure out a better way. The description in the resume. And I think as these roles change, which I think we're all agreeing on, there's some sort of evolution that's going to come with a new age of how we work. There's an opportunity, I think, for people to interact with what production is or what productivity is with this stuff in the mix. All right, I got two more. Do I have two more or three more? I think I have two more for you. Yeah, two more for you. This one, let me share the screen here. This one is from, let's see, Michael Franco. So let's get this one on the screen. Michael Franco he's commenting on a study by Gartner, 423 employees per HRBP. So that's the image that's nice for the podcast. But he says a Gartner study says that it will rise within the next 5 years. Could be 800, could be 1,200. He says 423 sounds high, but that's what he's saying. There's an average HRBP support of 423 employees. And, how does that role look? Is AI really creating a better experience? Do you need the people to do this type of stuff? So, if we're looking at first, whether or not a people department exists, second, what the jobs are eliminated or how they'll be reshaped. And then third, the productivity of an individual. Does that scale to an HRBP? What's your reaction, the Chris's?
I think this is another kind of fallacy as well. Like, just because AI is here, now people can manage, hundreds of people and do IC work at the same time. It's like, okay, right, try that. You've probably never run a company before. That, dealing with that many human beings is very, very complicated, right? And there is lots of unforeseen issues that come up just by nature of dealing with complex human beings. And you cannot predict that. And AI is not going to solve that problem. And so I think that's idiotic. I think it's just idiotic. I think it's just stupid. Frankly, I just think it's a stupid thing to say. Imagine one person managing 400 people. I mean, or like having the responsibility of keeping 400 people happy. I mean, that would be very, very tough. So, I think to Chris's point earlier, it's looking at the outcome. Like, what do you want the HRBP for? If you're happy to have an HRBP look over 400 people, do you even need an HRBP anyway? Right, at that point, I think that it's really about looking at what you want that role for and making sure that it can be effective. But I just can't imagine anyone can be effective over that with that span of control. But maybe I'm wrong.
You have to imagine that the employee relations function changes significantly. It's going to be hard. If you've watched the Uber documentary, you know that the HR team was busy. All right, I got one more for you guys, and kind of a continuing story on this AI in the world of HR. And this one is from Melissa Rosenthal. She's a founder herself, but comes from the marketing world for large tech companies. Let's get her up on the screen and her take on AI here. I think this is it. We got it. All right. Every AI subscription, is there an image? Yeah, the time bomb just went off. AI's all-you-can-eat era just ended in real time. And what she's citing here is that companies are blowing through their AI budget. Chris Manion and I did an interview with a startup CEO, 20-person company that raised $80 million, and they are spending it on AI. So I presume at scale, that means a lot going to AI. And so the question here is pricing going to be an issue? How is pricing of AI going to impact headcount? What's your reaction?
Yeah, Chris, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you just mentioned it with the kind of Uber Lyft price war, Eric. Like the race is to the bottom to get as many users on the platform, and then the prices will like that's a classic business model. But I think what we're seeing at the same time is the unit economics are getting better over time as well. And at some point we don't need the latest model to do all the things. We can use the like cheaper older model. So I think there's going to be some reconciliation with that. I think we've spoken to someone on their team bragged that they had spent, and it was actually an MIT meetup I went to recently. One of the engineers on the team had bragged that they'd burned through millions of dollars in tokens, and it was like a brag that they were able to do that. But I think it just shows there's no checks and balances internally within the team. So I don't think this is a sign that all of a sudden we're going to be paying $10,000 a month for our Claude minimum subscription. I think it's more likely that companies are going to have to start clamping down on token usage so that they're not burning through their whole 2026 budget in 4 months. So I think that's more of a guardrails and internal compliance issue, I think, to me, than any kind of signal that the market's going to change. Because I think we're still going to see a drive.
Yeah, I agree. I think that cost is only relative to the outcome, right? Like, and again, having this like analytical approach to how we're looking at why we're using AI is if you are using it, spending $100,000 a year on tokens, but the alternative would cost you 200,000 a year, then the spend is irrelevant, right? And so, but what I do think is happening is we're kind of exiting the phase of experimentation. I think that a lot of companies have kind of been okay with lack of ROI because they're figuring it out, they're experimenting, they're like testing it. And you're seeing now, I think Microsoft came out and said they're getting rid of Claude Code because they were spending too much on credits. I think that you've seen, I think the COO of Uber actually came out the last few days saying that they're not seeing the return on investment on token spend as they would expect. So I think we're going to see in the coming months a much more kind of tight approach to how these companies are spending tokens and what they're getting in return. And so I think that's a natural evolution. It's like, you've got to mess around. You've got to crack a few eggs to like figure out what's going on. But that can't last forever. And so that'll be interesting to see how that shapes out. I mean, even still, I've been spoken on quite a lot of panels or like speaking to a lot of leaders about how they're using AI. And it still is very rare that you speak to someone that has a very watertight use case for like their return on investment, right? It's like, we're doing this really cool thing and it's like really great, but we still haven't managed to get that last mile. We still haven't managed to get it there. So hopefully we can get it there. And like it really just starts to provide leverage. But I think that the jury's out for a lot of people at the moment.
I remember like back when social media was on the we're going to spend money as a corporation. There was a bunch of headlines about the big companies that decided to pull their spend. I think it was like auto manufacturers. And so there was a big headline. I think like one of the benefits of being in my 40s now is like, all right, I've been through a cycle. So we're seeing it again and that's fine. But I think just it is a part of the process. Always interesting to watch.
Absolutely.
Well, look, I think it's tremendously interesting to hear someone with your perspective kind of give us a take on how productivity is changing within the recruiting space, within the headcount space. From the eyes of Talentful, it's been great to have you on the podcast, and thank you for kind of like spot reacting to some of these things. But I think to close out, if you're a talent leader, if you're a finance person, you're making a plan for a year. The idea that there's production available to you in multiple forms, whether it's an in-house recruiter, a person itself hired by an in-house recruiter, hired by an RPO, an agency, or tokens that you're spending. There's a bigger conversation now about what our headcount plans going to look like in the future as we continue to figure out what AI is. And then, all of this marketplace for talent coming together to produce that service for these businesses over time. And so great to have you on the podcast. Another best episode ever. And we're right at time. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Headcount Experts. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Great spending time with you. Thanks. Awesome.